a slap in court, or the spark that sets fire to a broken system. When two white officers strike a quiet black woman in a packed Charleston courtroom, they think it's just another abuse of power. What they don't realize? She's not a bystander. She's the judge. Meet Judge Naomi Ellison. At 61, she's spent her life walking the tightrope of justice in a city still haunted by its past. But being the first black woman to wear the robe in Charleston's highest court hasn't shielded her from the racism embedded in its walls. On what should have been a routine hearing, Naomi is assaulted, open-handed, in front of witnesses and cameras, by Officer Travis Boon, a legacy cop with a long trail of buried complaints. He didn't recognize her without her robe. But that mistake? It's the one that unmasks a system built on silence. Naomi doesn't flinch. Instead, she unleashes everything: investigations, indictments, names. What happens next is bigger than a courtroom. This isn't just her fight, it's a reckoning. If you believe racism still hides behind badges and silence, subscribe now. Because Naomi's not backing down, and neither are we. This is Brave Truth Stories, and we're just getting started. It started with a slap, but that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Judge Naomi Ellison thought the worst was behind her when she placed Officer Boon under formal investigation. But corruption doesn't go quietly. Days after the incident, her name was dragged through the dirt. Articles appeared out of nowhere, questioning her past, twisting photos from her college years into weapons. She tried to brush it off. She'd faced worse. But then came the threats. First subtle, then sharp. A photo of her nephew biking home. A message on her windshield. "Stay in your place." Naomi moved faster, filed reports, contacted federal protection. But each step she took forward, the system pushed 2 steps back. Files vanished. Witnesses withdrew. The people she trusted most, colleagues, mentors, even her old law professor, started going quiet. She was chasing justice, but justice was slipping through her fingers like smoke. One night, her home alarm blared. She reached the door just in time to see taillights disappearing into the dark. Nothing stolen. Just a message burned into her garage door. "You were warned." Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed firm. She doubled security. She canceled public events. She carried on. Because silence wasn't an option. Not anymore. But it got worse. Her emails were hacked. Her sister's phone rang with distorted voices late at night. The school called. Someone tried to pick up her nephew, claiming to be a relative. Naomi's heart nearly collapsed. That was her breaking point. She pulled her nephew from school, moved her family into protective custody. Still, she refused to stop. With federal agents and a small group of allies, Naomi poured over 10 years of court cases. One by one, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Boon wasn't alone. He was part of something bigger, a network of officers, prosecutors, judges, people who called her colleague while secretly working to bury truth and reward silence. She gathered names, evidence, timelines. She even prepared a public press statement, one that would expose everything. The night before she planned to release it, she sat in her chambers alone. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside her heart was anything but. She kept seeing her nephew's face, the way he looked at her after the courtroom incident. Not scared, not ashamed, just proud. That look was the only thing keeping her moving. But that night, she didn't make it home. It was late. Naomi had just finished her final round of notes when she grabbed her coat, opened the door to leave, and saw him. Officer Boon. Not in uniform. No badge. Just a man standing in the shadows of her hallway. Her breath caught. He didn't speak. just handed her a small box and walked away. Inside was a flash drive. Against every instinct, she opened it. It wasn't evidence. It was footage. Grainy clips of her family, her nephew at the park, her sister walking into a grocery store, Naomi herself leaving her home. All taken from a distance, all dated within the last 3 days. The message was clear. "We see you." Naomi tried to stay calm. She picked up her phone, called the marshal's office, but the line crackled and died. She called Carter, her longtime court officer and trusted friend. Voicemail. She left a message. Then another. Then another. No answer. She didn't go home. She drove in circles, trying to think. Her hands shook on the wheel. She couldn't breathe right. Eventually, she pulled into a hotel lot and sat in the car with her head against the steering wheel. She wanted to scream, to cry. But she had done all that before. It hadn't helped. What did help was action. She made a copy of the drive, wrote out every detail of what she'd seen, who might be involved, where the pressure was coming from. She planned to hand it to the DOJ first thing in the morning. But morning never came. Because sometime around 3 a.m., someone broke into her hotel room. They didn't take anything. They didn't hurt her. They just left a card, plain white, one line printed in black. "This is your final warning." Naomi sat on the edge of the hotel bed, clutching the card. She had given everything to justice, her time, her voice, her peace, and now they wanted her silence. But she couldn't do it. Not when so many had already suffered in silence, not when the system depended on people giving up. So she made a decision. She would speak anyway. She would call a press conference, bring the flash drive, reveal the names, the network, the threats. If they were going to destroy her, they'd have to do it in public view. She never made it to the courthouse. The morning news broke before she did. "Judge Naomi Ellison under federal investigation for judicial misconduct." The words slammed into her like a fist. They'd turned the story against her. Fabricated charges, twisted her actions, said she'd violated ethics by investigating her own courtroom, said she'd falsified evidence. They'd weaponized her own pursuit of truth, turned her from a hero into a villain. In an instant, everything she'd built started to collapse. Her judicial status was suspended, her courtroom access revoked. Her public support began to waver. People whispered again. Not about the slap, but about her agenda. She tried to fight it, tried to submit evidence, but doors that used to open for her now locked behind her. Carter tried to help, but even he was pushed out, transferred without notice. The DOJ, once her ally, went quiet. Someone powerful had pulled the strings. Naomi was boxed in, so she ran, not away, but toward the only thing she had left. The truth. She took the original flash drive, the evidence she hadn't released yet, and she walked straight into the offices of a national journalist known for digging deep and playing dirty. "I have one story," she said, "but it could shake everything." They listened, took her files, verified her sources, promised protection. But protection doesn't come fast enough when the wolves are already circling. 3 days later, Naomi vanished. Her car was found abandoned outside a coastal bus station. Her phone, wiped clean. The flash drive, missing. But not everything was lost, because the journalist she met had already copied everything. And 5 days after Naomi disappeared, the story dropped. The footage, the threats, the corrupt officers, the names, everything. And the public erupted. Protests, investigations, demands. They called it the Naomi File. Her name was cleared, but she wasn't there to see it. No one knows where she is. Some say she was taken. Others say she went into hiding. A few believe she's still out there, waiting. But one thing is clear. She didn't fail. She set the fire. And now it's burning through the silence. If you believe in justice, real justice, the kind that doesn't back down, the kind that costs something, subscribe now to this channel. Naomi Ellison's story isn't over. Because sometimes you have to disappear to make the truth impossible to ignore. And this truth? It's just getting started. Judge Naomi Ellison had always known the price of truth, but she never imagined it would cost her everything. After the incident in the courtroom, after Officer Boon struck her in front of witnesses and cameras, after she stood tall and triggered an investigation, she thought the system would rise with her. But she was wrong. The system didn't want to be cleaned. It wanted her gone. First came the whispers, articles surfacing from nowhere, headlines twisting her past into scandal. Activist judge linked to radical groups. Improper conduct allegations from 2009 resurface. Photos of her at a college protest, smiling, fist raised, were recaptioned to suggest rage, not purpose. She knew the game. Paint the black woman as angry. Undermine her voice, discredit her before she could finish the sentence. But Naomi didn't stop. She refused to shrink. She kept working. Quietly, strategically. With federal agents and her trusted aide Carter, she collected evidence, names, timelines. Boon was just the surface. Beneath him was a network that ran deep. Officers, prosecutors, judges, even elected officials. Every file revealed a new thread. And every step closer she got, the pushback hit harder. Her courthouse access was suddenly restricted. Doors she'd walked through for 20 years no longer opened without escort. Carter was reassigned without explanation. Her emails stopped working. Her phone buzzed with strange messages. Some silent, some filled with static. Others with a single word. Stop. Then the threats turned physical. It began with the box. Hand-delivered by Boon himself, like a warning cloaked in arrogance. Inside, surveillance of her family. Photos of her nephew biking, her sister at the grocery store, her walking alone at dusk. All recent, all invasive. Naomi's blood turned cold. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Instead, she spent hours listing every place her family had gone, every route her nephew took from school, every camera angle they'd need to watch them. She called the marshals. They promised protection. But promises don't stop fear from crawling down your spine at 3 a.m. Then came the hotel break-in. No damage, no theft. Just a message. This is your final warning. It was personal now. They weren't just trying to silence her. They were trying to destroy her spirit. But Naomi still didn't stop. She gathered everything. The files, the drive, the names, and walked into a national journalist's office with a trembling voice and a mountain of courage. "If I disappear," she said, "don't let them bury this." The journalist nodded, promised to protect it, promised to make it loud. 3 days later, Naomi vanished. Her car was found abandoned, her phone wiped clean, the flash drive missing. The city erupted, the public, once hesitant, now furious. "Where is Judge Ellison?" signs read. "Truth doesn't disappear." Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag, "Where's Naomi?" "Justice for Ellison." But no one could answer. Carter searched every corner of Charleston. Agents turned over every file. But Naomi was gone. Some believed she ran. Others believed she was taken. And a few whispered something deeper. Maybe she had to vanish to finish what she started. And then the story broke. The journalist kept their word. The Naomi File went public, and the truth poured out like floodwater. Boon's record, the surveillance, the network of corruption, the bribes, the disappearing cases, the system that protected itself with blood and silence. The city trembled. Investigations launched. Names were named. Boon was arrested. Indictments rolled in. The courts quaked. But Naomi didn't return. And behind the headlines, the real cost was still unfolding, because Naomi hadn't disappeared into safety. She was on the run, hunted by the very system she'd once served, moved from safe house to safe house by allies who believed in her cause, but feared for her life. She slept with her shoes on, ate cold meals out of cans, watched the news from hotel lobbies, always wearing sunglasses, always with a second exit in mind. Her body ached constantly. Her hands shook at night. She kept a burner phone in one pocket and a USB with backup evidence in the other. But the hardest part wasn't the fear, it was the isolation. She couldn't call her sister, couldn't speak to her nephew, couldn't hear Carter's steady voice or trust that any line wasn't tapped. Every second of every day, she felt the weight of those absences, not because they hurt her, but because she knew they were hurting too. She imagined her sister lying awake, wondering if Naomi was alive, her nephew walking through a school hall, catching whispers, and not knowing what to believe. Carter staring at an empty desk, his jaw tight with helplessness. The silence hurt worse than the threat, and it got worse. At one safe house, she found a newspaper clipping under her door. Judge Ellison's family under protective watch, after threats escalate. A line was underlined in red ink. Unconfirmed reports suggest her nephew has been relocated. Naomi's knees buckled. They knew where he was. She stayed up all night writing a letter, one she could never send, just to feel like she'd said something. It began, "I'm sorry I made you a target. I only wanted to make things better. I never meant to leave you in fear." Then the power went out. She waited in the dark, heartbeat like a drum, holding her breath until sunrise. At her lowest point, she considered turning herself in, not to admit guilt, but to stop the pain for the people she loved. Maybe if she surrendered, they'd leave her family alone. Maybe if she disappeared from the headlines, the fire would die down. She even wrote a statement, printed it, folded it into her pocket. But the next day, she saw a little girl at a diner. About 8, black, sitting across from her grandmother, eating pancakes. Naomi watched the girl laugh and thought, what world is she growing up in? One where truth is buried under politics. One where justice means survival instead of peace. That's when Naomi knew. She couldn't give up. She wouldn't. So she resurfaced. Not in person, but through paper. She mailed files anonymously, posted court transcripts on encrypted forums, shared evidence with advocacy groups. She didn't speak. She didn't show her face. But her fingerprints were everywhere. Every headline that exposed a new corrupt official had Naomi's touch. Every leak, every whistleblower file, every case reopened. It all traced back to the woman they thought they silenced. And slowly, the city changed. Boon was convicted. The officers who stood behind him fell one by one. The mayor's office came under federal review. Prosecutors were fired. Judges were suspended. And the story grew from one courtroom to an entire country. Naomi's silence became a signal. If she could fight this hard, maybe others could too. And then came the letter, addressed to her sister. No return, No sender. Just a note. Tell him I love him. I'll come home when it's safe. Until then, I'm still watching. The family cried for hours. They never responded. They knew it wasn't safe, but they held the letter close, and so did the city. Statues were vandalized in her name. Courtroom doors were graffitied with "Justice for Naomi." Children wore shirts with her silhouette, and the words, "Truth doesn't hide." Schools taught her story. Churches preached her strength. And across every street of Charleston, her name echoed. Not as a victim, not even as a judge, but as a fighter. And Naomi? She kept moving, because the system was still fighting back. New officials tried to erase her legacy. Old ones resurfaced, promising reform but delivering nothing. She saw it all, watched from a distance, kept files, named names, waited for the moment she could return, not as a fugitive, but as a witness. That moment came 1 year later. A new governor, a new federal task force, a public commission inviting whistleblowers to testify. Naomi stepped out of the shadows. She walked into the Charleston courthouse, frailer than before, thinner, her hair streaked with more silver, her hands slightly shaking, but her spine still straight. The crowd outside was massive. Cameras, reporters, survivors, families. A city waiting to see if the woman they thought was gone forever had truly come back. And she had. She took the stand not as Judge Ellison, but as Naomi. She told everything. The slap, the threats, the files, the exile, the pain, the loneliness, the choice. She wept just once, when she spoke of her nephew, of the night she thought she'd never see him again. The room cried with her. And when she finished, the courtroom rose in silence. Then came the applause, slow, then roaring, because she had done the unthinkable. She stood when the world tried to crush her. She spoke when silence was safer. She fought not for revenge, but for something better. After the testimony, Naomi declined any title. She refused a judgeship, a political seat, even a book deal. All she wanted was peace. She returned to her family, finally, to the porch in Mount Pleasant, where the breeze smelled like salt and safety. Her nephew ran to her. Older now, taller, he hugged her like the world might split if he let go. "You made them listen," he whispered. "I made them look," she replied. "Listening. That's still up to them." They sat together until the sun sank low. No robes, no speeches, just love, and a quiet kind of justice, the kind that doesn't flash, but stays. So if this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe now, because Naomi's fight isn't just a headline, it's a reminder. Justice might hide, but it never disappears. Not when people like her are still willing to burn for it. Naomi Ellison was finally home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The house was the same. The porch she'd dreamed of sitting on in peace, the creaking wooden steps her nephew used to race up, the magnolia tree that bloomed late every spring. But Naomi? Naomi wasn't the same woman who left. She was tired in a way that couldn't be measured in hours. The kind of tired that settled deep in the bones and didn't leave. The kind that came from carrying truth too long without anyone willing to share the weight. She had told her story. She had stood in the courtroom with her voice raw from silence, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights, her heart cracked wide open in front of strangers and survivors. But it didn't heal her. Not all the way. Because even though justice had taken a step forward, the scars she carried still bled in private. And she felt alone. Even in a room full of supporters, she felt like a ghost in her own life. People cheered her name, called her a hero, a fighter, a survivor. But when she went home, when the doors were locked and the lights turned low, Naomi Ellison sat with the echo of everything she'd lost. Her courtroom, her robe, her reputation, dragged through the mud before being scrubbed clean. The time she would never get back. The friends who vanished when things got hard. The silence of those she thought would stand beside her. It was like surviving a fire, only to come back to the ashes and try to breathe. Every morning, she still looked over her shoulder. Every night, she checked the locks twice. The sound of a car idling too long outside sent her heart racing. The ring of a blocked number made her freeze. The trauma hadn't left. It had just put on a new suit. And the worst part? Some people still didn't believe her, still whispered that maybe she exaggerated. Maybe she misread the threats. Maybe she brought it on herself by pushing too hard. She was always so ambitious, they said behind her back. Maybe she made enemies because she wasn't willing to compromise. Naomi heard it. All of it. And it broke her in ways she couldn't show. Because when you're a black woman fighting the system, even after you win, you're expected to smile. But she couldn't smile. Not when she still woke up from nightmares of Boon's hand cracking across her face. Not when she still saw that white card on the hotel pillow. This is your final warning. Every time she closed her eyes. Not when she thought of the journalist, Julia Spence, who had helped her before mysteriously vanishing. Another woman who got too close to the truth. Another voice swallowed by the system. Naomi had lit the match, yes, but the fire had burned parts of her she didn't know were flammable. She'd given the people her truth, but it had cost her the pieces she didn't know she'd need later. One afternoon, sitting on the porch with her nephew, he looked at her with those big, questioning eyes and asked softly, "Auntie, are you okay now?" Naomi blinked hard. She wanted to say yes, to protect him, to pretend that justice had made everything whole. But she couldn't lie to the one person who still looked at her like she was made of gold. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." He didn't say anything. He just reached over and held her hand. It was the first time in weeks she didn't feel like she was falling. But the battle wasn't over. Not even close. Because the old power structures hadn't disappeared. They had simply gone quiet. Licked their wounds. Reorganized behind closed doors. Naomi knew that silence. She knew what it meant. They were waiting for the right moment to strike back. Quietly. Carefully. Not with threats this time, but with procedure, with bureaucracy, with new policies designed to look clean on paper, but twist the truth in practice. Naomi had seen the new reports, the attempts to reshape oversight committees, to replace progressive prosecutors with more neutral voices. It was a new version of the old playbook. She recognized every page, and it filled her with rage. Not the kind that screamed, but the kind that sat heavy in her chest, like stone. So she made a choice. She would not go quietly into the background. She would not be the judge who almost changed everything. She would be the one who finished it. Naomi began writing. Late into the night, she poured everything onto paper. Not a memoir. Not yet. But a record. A blueprint for dismantling what was still standing. She mapped out corrupt connections between departments, noted the names of rising officials tied to old power, created a timeline of legislation designed to erase transparency. She made copies, sent them to allies she trusted, to advocacy groups, to federal monitors. She left no room for erasure, because if they came for her again, they wouldn't find fear. They'd find fire. But the toll kept climbing. Her health began to suffer. Her doctor warned her about stress-related hypertension. Her hands ached from old nerve damage made worse by sleepless nights. She missed meals. She missed birthdays. She missed being Naomi. The woman, not the symbol. One day, alone in the bathroom, she broke, sank to the floor, and sobbed, not because she was weak, but because strength like hers, carried too long, can crush even the strongest heart. She stayed there for an hour. No calls, no cameras. Just a woman who had given everything and now wondered if she'd have anything left when it was over. And that's when she realized something even deeper. She hadn't done it for herself. She had done it for every person who never made it to a courtroom, for every child lost to a system that judged their skin before their actions, for every mother who held a picture of their son instead of their hand, for every community that whispered about that cop but was too afraid to speak aloud, for the past, for the present, for the future. Naomi stood up, washed her face, and whispered to her reflection, "If I fall forward." That week, she took the stage at a City Hall event, invited not as a judge, but as a truth-teller. The room was packed. Survivors, activists, students, and critics, too. Cameras lined the walls. Naomi stepped up to the microphone, hands trembling slightly. She didn't read from a speech. She didn't speak like a lawyer. She spoke like a woman who had suffered and survived. "I am not here today because I wanted to be," she said quietly. "I'm here because I had no other choice." She paused. "When you fight corruption, it doesn't bleed, it buries you. It buries you in headlines, in threats, in loneliness, in nights where the silence is so loud it makes your ears ring. But I kept digging, and I'm still digging." She looked out over the crowd. "I don't need applause. I don't need a title. But I do need something." She leaned in. "I need you to keep looking. I need you to stop believing that this was a happy ending. Because it's not. I'm still hurting. I'm still fighting. And so are the people behind me, beside me, and the ones you'll never meet." She stepped back. Let the silence hang. Then, just before walking off, she said, "If you believe in what I stood for, what I still stand for, don't just clap. Press the like button right now. Not because it fixes everything, but because it says you're watching. You care. You see me. And if enough of you do that, I'll keep going." The audience rose, not in cheers, but in respect, because Naomi didn't ask for fame. She asked for solidarity. And in that moment, she got it. The video of her speech went viral. Again, millions watched. Thousands commented. But most importantly, they hit that like button, not out of habit, but out of belief. Belief in her. Belief in justice. Belief that even if the road was long and the cost high, Naomi Ellison was still worth following, still worth fighting for. And if you've made it this far in her story, press the like button now. Let her know she's not standing alone, because the world needs more people like Naomi. And Naomi? She just needs to know we're with her, until the end. No one knows exactly what Naomi Ellison did in those missing 3 weeks. After the courtroom erupted, and she vanished without a trace, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she ran to another state. Others claimed she was taken by the very people she exposed. But the truth? The truth is far stranger. Because Naomi didn't disappear to hide. She disappeared to finish what she started. From the inside. She went into the belly of the beast, not knowing if she'd come out again. No security, no cameras, no allies. Just a plan built on whispers and a spine made of fire. What few people know is that before she vanished, Naomi received one final message. Not from Boon, not from the mayor, but from someone else, someone deep inside the city's darkest corridors. A single line. I have the archive. Meet me where the truth was first buried. No name, no number, no second chance. She showed Carter the message. He begged her not to go. Let the feds handle it, he said. They won't, Naomi replied. They're part of it. So she packed light, disappeared into the night, and the next morning her car was found abandoned. That's where the public story ends. But not Naomi's, because deep below the city, in the ruins of an old courthouse tunnel once sealed off after a flood decades ago, Naomi walked into the shadows with a flashlight and a name. A real one this time. One that would change everything. It wasn't a nickname or alias. It was someone people trusted, a man who had retired in silence, who had watched the system rot from within and kept quiet to stay alive. Judge Harold Grayson. He met Naomi underground, face hollow with regret, and he handed her a battered metal case. I kept them, he said. Inside, records, files, photos, audio tapes, proof of evidence tampering, internal memos from the DA's office, secret video footage from trials where outcomes were bought before the gavel ever dropped. A map of corruption so detailed it made Naomi's skin crawl. One tape even showed a private meeting between Boon, ADA Ramsey, and a retired police captain discussing how to neutralize problematic witnesses. Another revealed a payout to silence a grieving mother whose son died in custody. Naomi didn't speak. She just took the case, nodded once, and left. But escaping with it? That was the risk. The moment she emerged from the tunnel, she knew she was being watched. A black SUV pulled onto the corner as she crossed the street. She didn't run. She walked, fast but steady, heart pounding like a war drum. Two men stepped out of the SUV. No uniforms, no badges, just suits and silence. Naomi turned into an alley, climbed a fire escape with her hands still trembling. She spent the night in a stranger's apartment, an old friend from law school who owed her a favor and didn't ask questions. That was night one. For the next 19 days, she moved like a shadow. Changed hotels every other day, used burner phones she kept in coffee tins, wore sunglasses indoors, ate only when she could. Slept with her back to the door. The metal case never left her side. She knew if they caught her with it, she'd never be heard from again. The mystery isn't just in what she found, it's in what she did with it. Some say she leaked it to journalists. Others say she gave it to a foreign news outlet just in case. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Naomi didn't leak it at all. She encrypted it. She turned the entire archive into a digital lockbox, then split the key into 7 pieces. Each piece sent to a different person in different cities. One to a former student. One to a legal blogger. One to a librarian in Chicago she met once and trusted instantly. Another to a trauma nurse who'd lost her brother in a bogus arrest. No one knew what they had. Only Naomi had the code to unlock them. She created a safety system built on trust, built on community. And just in case, she recorded a message. If you're hearing this, she said, voice steady, I'm either dead or silenced. But that doesn't mean the truth dies with me. Together, you hold the key. When the time comes, use it. But the time never came. Because Naomi made it back. Just as suddenly as she vanished, she returned. Worn, thinner, but unbroken, and she stood before the world and testified. But she didn't mention the archive. She didn't reveal how close the shadows came to swallowing her. She didn't speak of the tunnels, the SUV, or the man with the scar who followed her across 3 counties. She kept all of that to herself. Until now. Because last night, one of the people she trusted, one of the 7, called her in tears. "I think I'm being followed," they said. "I didn't even know what I was carrying." And Naomi knew. They were moving again. Which means she has a decision to make. Unseal the archive? Drop everything she has into the world? Truth so raw and brutal it could tear down half the city's power? Or wait and protect the people holding the keys? Either way, the clock is ticking. And she can't make this choice alone. So if you're reading this, if you believe Naomi Ellison risked everything for justice, if you believe she deserves support, not silence, leave a comment right now. Tell her what she should do. Should she release the archive and risk everything? Or protect the people holding the pieces? Your voice matters. Because Naomi? She's listening. She always has been. Naomi Ellison never set out to become a symbol. She just wanted to do her job, to serve justice, not manipulate it. But when you're a black woman sitting on the highest bench in Charleston's courts, justice isn't handed to you. It's something you fight for, bleed for. And sometimes, it's something you vanish for. After Officer Boon struck her in a courtroom full of people, after she stood and made the system look at itself for the first time in decades, Naomi disappeared, not to hide, but to survive long enough to finish what she started. She had touched something too dangerous, too buried. And now, the system that had smiled in her face for years was whispering threats behind closed doors. She wasn't just a target. She was a trigger. And they were ready to pull. What Naomi discovered in those dark weeks, the truth she unearthed, wasn't just painful. It was staggering. There was a network of silence far wider than anyone guessed. Files missing, body cams turned off, cases closed without evidence, bribes disguised as budget adjustments, judges, officers, attorneys all sharing one goal: protect the image, not the people. Naomi stumbled on it all when an anonymous tip led her to the sealed tunnel beneath the old courthouse. There, she met someone who had once sat beside her at Justice's table, Judge Harold Grayson. But he no longer believed in robes. He believed in confession. And what he gave her wasn't a warning. It was a loaded gun made of truth. Inside the battered case he handed her were tapes, memos, confessions, photographs, an entire archive of everything the city wanted erased. But carrying that case was like holding a flame to gasoline. The second she took it, she was hunted. 2 men in a black SUV followed her from the edge of the courthouse ruins. She turned down a side street, slipped through a service door into a hotel kitchen, borrowed a chef's apron, and exited through the back like a ghost. She changed clothes in the restroom of a train station, paid cash, took a bus across the city. And that was day 1. For the next 19 days, Naomi lived minute to minute. Her phone off, her name off the record, her face hidden under baseball caps and oversized sunglasses. She moved from motels to safe houses, living off vending machine snacks and cold coffee. Each night, she barely slept, only allowed herself to rest when she could push a chair under the door handle and wedge the archive beneath the mattress. It never left her sight. Not even when she showered. She kept the water running while she reviewed footage. Watched over and over the video of Boon shaking hands with Ada Ramsey in a backroom bar. The conversation was muffled, but one sentence slipped through clear as glass. She steps out of line, and we bury her in her own principles. Naomi didn't cry. She couldn't. If she broke then, she'd never get back up. Instead, she acted. She broke the archive into pieces, digitally encoded it, split it into 7 fragments, and sent each to a person she trusted with their life, but not their knowledge. None of them knew what they had. They just knew Naomi said it was important. They obeyed. No questions. That's how deep their respect for her ran. She also recorded a final message, just in case. If you're seeing this, I didn't make it, but don't let that stop you. You have the truth, and now, so does the world. But somehow, Naomi did make it. She came back, and she testified. She stood before the press and the public and told a fraction of what she had seen. Enough to spark investigations. Enough to bring down Boon and Ramsey and trigger a federal oversight of the Charleston courts. But not everything. Not the deepest part. Not the archive. Not yet. Because Naomi knew releasing it meant endangering those who carried the keys. And so she waited. Until last night. That's when it started again. One of the 7 called her, voice shaking. "I don't know what's going on," the woman whispered. "I think someone's following me. They know my name." Naomi's blood turned cold. It meant the system wasn't dead. It was waking up again, and this time it was angrier. Now Naomi has a choice. Release the full archive, expose everything, or risk more lives. The weight of that decision is crushing her. She walks the same halls she once ruled, but her heart feels like a stranger in her own chest. Her health has declined. Her blood pressure spikes at every unexpected knock. She can't sleep without locking every door twice. She can't breathe deeply without remembering the look in Carter's eyes when she said, "I have to go." She can't rest because she's seen what happens when the truth is silenced. And more than anything, she's tired. Not the kind of tired you sleep off, the kind that buries itself in your bones and whispers, "What more do they want from me?" She's lost her position, lost her peace, nearly lost her life, and still the choice is hers alone. So tonight, Naomi sits at her kitchen table, staring at the last fragment of the archive still in her possession. It glows faintly on a drive the size of a thumb. She turns it slowly between her fingers. Outside, a storm is rolling in. Thunder rumbles, low and distant, like a voice reminding her the storm is always closer than it sounds. She thinks about her nephew, about what he said after she came home. "You made them listen, Auntie." And she wants to believe it. But she knows the truth. They heard her. But they didn't listen, because the moment her voice went quiet again, the darkness started creeping back in. That's why she's telling this story now. To you. Because maybe you haven't heard the full truth. Not until now. Maybe you didn't know Naomi slept on bus benches with court files in her coat. Maybe you didn't know she once pulled a fire alarm in a government building to escape a tail. Maybe you didn't know that when she finally returned home, there was a bullet hole in her mailbox. Maybe you didn't know that she's still receiving texts from blocked numbers that say, "Walk away." But now you do. Now you know. And knowing makes you part of this story. Because Naomi can't carry it all anymore. She's asking you, yes, you, to help decide what happens next. Should she unseal the archive? Should she risk the people she loves and light a fire that might burn everything? Or should she wait again and pray that someone else will finish what she started? This isn't fiction. This is happening. Right now. And Naomi? She's watching the screen. She's reading the comments. She's listening for hope. So if you believe she's done enough, if you believe that truth should not cost someone their safety, their family, their future, leave a comment below. Let Naomi know she's not alone. Tell her she's not crazy for believing the system can change. And if you believe what she's endured deserves more than silence, press the like button right now, not just to support Naomi, but to remind the world that courage like hers doesn't die in shadows. It burns, it endures, and it inspires. Because Naomi Ellison didn't disappear to run. She disappeared to reveal the truth. And now she's back. But what she does next? That's in your hands. Naomi Ellison hadn't planned for her life to unfold in shadows. Not after spending 3 decades fighting for light, fighting to be heard, to be seen, to be respected inside a system that too often treated women like her as disposable. But once Officer Boon slapped her in a packed courtroom, everything she thought she knew about power and justice began to unravel. What the world saw was a slap. Shocking, yes, but what they didn't see was what followed. The unraveling wasn't loud, it was silent, strategic, measured. The system that had smiled in her face for years began to erase her like she was nothing but a wrinkle in their plan. It started with rumors. Articles whispered about Naomi's temperament, that she was difficult, emotional, biased. Photos from her college years protesting with a raised fist resurfaced online, repackaged as threats, not history. Her emails were suddenly locked. Her court assignments reassigned without warning. Friends she had trusted for decades stopped returning her calls. At first, she thought it would pass, that the truth would win out, that the slap, captured on camera, witnessed by dozens, would lead to reform. But the deeper she pushed, the more she realized this wasn't about one officer. It was about the system protecting itself. Then she got the message. No signature, no threats, just a single sentence. Meet me where the truth was first buried. She knew better than to chase ghosts, but something in her gut, something shaped by years of instincts sharpened by injustice, told her this wasn't a trap. It was a thread. And if she followed it, she might just pull down the whole curtain. She didn't tell anyone. Not even Carter. She went alone. The location wasn't a mystery. The old courthouse, the one condemned after a hurricane had flooded its basement in the 90s, was quiet now. Its marble steps cracked and overgrown, its windows boarded shut. But Naomi had argued her first civil rights case in that building. She hadn't forgotten the layout. She slipped in through a side entrance with nothing but a flashlight, a burner phone, and a fire in her chest that wouldn't die. In the tunnels beneath, she found him. Judge Harold Grayson, retired, rumored dead by some. He had once been a quiet ally, a man who believed in reform, but not revolution. He had disappeared after a scandal swept through the DA's office years ago, and no one had seen him since. He didn't greet her with warmth, just handed her a rusted steel case and said, "I didn't speak when I should have, but I saved this." Inside the case, evidence, footage, transcripts, confidential memos, audio recordings of closed-door meetings where officers joked about cleaning up witness testimonies, emails between Ada Ramsey and key judges arranging plea deals in exchange for campaign donations, surveillance photos of Naomi, her sister, her nephew, all taken after the courtroom slap. Naomi couldn't speak. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just corruption, it was orchestration, and she was the main target. She took the case and left with one promise. If I go down, this doesn't go with me. That night, she didn't go home. She stayed in a motel off the highway, using a name from her college days. She ate nothing, slept less. She watched every car that passed, listened for footsteps in the hallway, braced for knocks that never came. Then, the next day, she started moving. Fast, quiet, alone. She changed hotels every 48 hours, avoided cameras, burned through prepaid phones like matchsticks. She didn't speak to her family, didn't check in with Carter. She knew if she left a trail, it wouldn't be just her life at risk. It would be theirs. Each night, she reviewed a new piece of the archive. One video showed Boon in an unmarked van, boasting about shutting up a journalist, Julia Spence. Her death had been ruled an overdose. Naomi now knew that was a lie. Another file contained a memo from the mayor's office approving a budget increase for internal personnel retention, coded language for hush money. Naomi wanted to scream. Instead, she planned. She divided the archive into 7 encrypted files and sent each one to someone she trusted: a law student she'd mentored, a former client, a journalist she once clashed with but respected. None of them knew what they had. That was the point. If something happened to her, they'd hold pieces of the truth. And together, they could rebuild it. Then came the encounter in the parking garage. Naomi was retrieving a clean burner phone from a storage locker when she saw them. 2 men, dark suits, no insignia, standing too still near the stairwell. She turned, fast, pretended to have forgotten something. They followed. She ducked into a supply corridor, climbed a maintenance ladder to the 2nd level, and fled across rooftops until her legs ached and her lungs screamed. She didn't stop until sunrise. That night, she cried in a motel bathtub, not because she was afraid, but because she was exhausted. Because she had given her life to a system that would rather destroy her than admit it was broken. But the pain didn't make her weaker. It made her sharper. She resurfaced weeks later. Publicly. On purpose. She walked into a press conference with Carter at her side, her hair pulled back, her voice calm, her hands still trembling. She didn't reveal the archive. Not yet. But she gave them just enough. Boon's name, Ramsey's emails, the surveillance on her nephew, enough to make the walls shake. The room fell silent, then exploded. Boon was arrested. Ramsey resigned. But it wasn't over. Naomi knew the deeper rot remained, so she returned home, quietly, kept low, waited, until the night she got the call. One of the 7. A young woman named Camille, who had been in Naomi's courtroom once for a wrongful eviction case. She had taken a USB drive weeks ago, thinking it was just data. "They know," Camille whispered. "I think someone followed me." That was all Naomi needed to hear. She didn't sleep that night. She went to her porch, lit a candle, watched the flame flicker in the dark. And then, she acted. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She unlocked the archive, sent it, this time, to everyone. The Department of Justice, the New York Times, a nonprofit watchdog, an international human rights group, 3 whistleblower networks, every name, every file, every image. Then she added one more thing, a video of herself. Sitting alone in her kitchen. No makeup, no lighting, no script. "I'm Naomi Ellison," she said. "I was a judge. I was nearly erased. This is what they didn't want you to see." Her voice cracked. "But now you've seen it." She stared into the lens. "I'm tired, but I'm not done. And neither are you." And she ended the video with words that would later be printed on murals across Charleston. "The truth didn't protect me, but it set me free." The world erupted. Not with rage, with recognition. People saw themselves in her, survivors, fighters, truth-tellers who had been told to shut up, sit down, blend in. Naomi gave them a voice, and in doing so, found her own again. She didn't return to the bench, didn't want to. Instead, she founded a legal fellowship in Julia Spence's name, training young lawyers to defend whistleblowers and pursue systemic reform. She gave lectures. Quiet ones. Powerful ones. She hugged her nephew every morning, tended her garden, slept deeply, without fear. Because the storm had passed. Not because it faded, but because she had walked through it. And now you know the truth. What she saw, what she risked, what she endured. So if her story moved you, if you see yourself in Naomi, press the like button now. Let her know you were listening. Let her know the pain wasn't invisible. Leave a comment. Tell her what her courage meant to you. Or share your own story, because she's still reading, still listening, still standing. And subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like Naomi's, more voices that deserve to be heard, more truth that needs to be told. Naomi Ellison didn't just fight the system. She rewrote its ending. And maybe, just maybe, her story can help you write yours too. In the end, it wasn't the courtroom, the headlines, or the archive that defined Naomi Ellison's story. It was the choice she made when the world went quiet, when the crowd faded, when the cameras turned away, when the danger remained, whispering threats just out of view. It was in that stillness, in that wait, that she chose something greater than fear. She chose resolution. She chose healing. And for the first time in years, Naomi chose herself. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. The decision to unseal the archive was not easy. She knew what it meant. Knew that the names on those files weren't just faceless criminals. Some were fathers, mothers, pillars of their communities. But justice doesn't ask if you're well loved. It asks if you did what was right. So Naomi, sitting in the soft light of her kitchen, with the storm past and the city just beginning to breathe again, entered the final code. She watched the screen flicker, the files unlock, and with a trembling hand, she sent the entire archive to the Department of Justice, to trusted journalists, to public advocacy networks. Not anonymously this time. She signed it herself. Naomi Ellison, retired judge, survivor, citizen. And when she hit send, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. Within hours, the story broke nationwide. The tapes, the reports, the photos, the voices of those long silenced. It was undeniable. The fallout was swift. Several resignations hit within days. Investigations expanded to 5 states. Federal oversight widened its reach. And Naomi? She watched from her porch in Mount Pleasant, sipping tea as the world finally read the pages she'd bled over. There were no parades, no medals, no interviews on late-night shows, just the quiet knowing. She had done what needed to be done. The justice system she had once fought to be part of was finally being remade. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly, and that was enough. But the most beautiful part of the ending wasn't in what Naomi brought down. It was what she helped rise. In the months that followed, her story inspired hundreds to come forward. Teachers, nurses, officers, clerks, whistleblowers who had kept quiet for fear of being torn apart like she was. But when they saw her stand again, still whole, still standing, they realized they could speak too. Naomi received thousands of letters, some handwritten, some emailed. One from a boy in Texas who wrote, "I used to want to be famous. Now I want to be brave, like you." Her nephew read that one aloud on the porch. Naomi laughed, then cried, then said, "That's it. That's why we do it." But even more powerful than the letters were the changes happening in real time. The school that once called her nephew with suspicious concerns? They named a scholarship after Naomi. The courthouse that once tried to silence her? They hung her portrait in the lobby, right next to the Constitution. And her voice? It never stopped. Naomi began speaking, quietly, calmly, but with the gravity only lived truth can carry. She visited law schools, spoke to young black women entering the field, and told them, "Your integrity will be tested more than your knowledge. Hold the line anyway." She taught students that justice is not about punishment. It's about protection. Not of systems, but of people. Of dignity. Of truth. And one day, she stood on the same courthouse steps where it all began. The crowd was smaller this time, but that was okay, because Naomi didn't need a crowd anymore. She only needed to speak. "I'm not here to relive what happened," she told them. "You already know my story. I'm here to remind you what to do with yours." She paused. "You will be asked to sit down, to be quiet, to let things go. But ask yourself, what kind of world are you leaving behind if you say yes?" Another pause. "Speak, even if your voice shakes. Stand, even if your knees do too. And remember, change doesn't start with laws. It starts with people." The applause was quiet, but it lasted long. Naomi stepped back from the microphone, not as a victim, not even as a judge, but as a woman who had done the impossible and lived to smile again. She returned home to her garden, to her sister, to her nephew, to mornings where she could finally watch the sun rise without wondering who was watching her. And for the first time in years, Naomi began to dream. Not of justice. That part she had already delivered. She dreamed of peace. And now, as her story finds its way to your screen, her voice finds its way to your heart. Because this story, it isn't just about the slap or the system or the scandal. It's about the choice to believe that doing the right thing is never wasted. It's about what happens when someone refuses to give up. And more importantly, it's about you. Because maybe you've faced injustice too. Maybe you've been silenced, ignored, punished for telling the truth. Maybe you're carrying something right now that the world says is too heavy. If so, you are not alone. Naomi's story is your proof. So here's what we can all learn from her. Silence is comfortable, but truth is powerful. If you've been waiting to speak, waiting to stand, do it. Even if your voice cracks, that's how courage begins. How courage. Systems protect themselves. People protect each other. Be the kind of person who doesn't walk away when someone is being crushed by the system. Healing is not weakness. Naomi didn't recover by winning. She recovered by choosing herself, choosing peace, and letting others carry the torch. You can too. Change is slow, but it's real. And it starts the moment someone like you decides they've seen enough. So if Naomi's story moved you, do something simple but powerful. Press the like button. Right now. It tells the world this story matters. That truth matters. That Naomi matters. Leave a comment. Let her know what her fight meant to you. Tell her what you've survived. Or just say thank you. And subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Stories of resilience, of justice, of hope. And we want you to hear every single one. Naomi Ellison didn't just survive a broken system. She rebuilt herself. And in doing so, she helped rebuild the world around her. She's proof that even after everything is taken from you, if you hold on to what's right, you can still win. Not loudly, but completely. So don't let her story end here. Share it. Talk about it. Carry it. Because one day, Someone you love might be standing where she stood. And they'll need to remember Naomi. They'll need to remember you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing in what's right, no matter how long it takes.